Two Black Hawk helicopters do not just land on a suburban highway during rush hour unless the world is ending or someone very important is missing. The wind from the rotors flattened the tall grass along Route 9, forcing cars to screech to a halt. Drivers stepped out, phones recording, terrified and confused. But the soldiers jumping out weren't looking for a terrorist. They weren't looking for a bomb. A captain with a scarred face sprinted toward a woman walking alone on the shoulder, clutching a cardboard box of personal belongings. He didn't point a weapon. He pointed a finger at the hospital she had just left. "Ma'am, are you the one they just fired?" When she nodded stunned, he grabbed his radio. "We found her," turning the birds around. "Tell the general we're bringing the angel back." The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's Medical Center hummed with a headache-inducing flicker that nurse Rachel Bennett had learned to ignore after 10 years on the floor. It was 2:00 a.m., the graveyard shift where the chaos of the day usually settled into a rhythmic beeping of monitors. But tonight, the emergency room was vibrating with tension centered entirely around bed 4. Rachel adjusted the IV drip, her eyes scanning the vitals of the man lying unconscious in the sheets. He had come in as a John Doe, found slumped in an alleyway 3 blocks from the hospital. No wallet, no phone, just tactical boots worn down at the heels and a faded grey t-shirt that clung to a frame built of solid muscle. He was covered in sweat, his temperature spiking to 104 degrees, and he was murmuring things in his delirium that sounded like coordinates. "He's stabilizing, but barely," Rachel whispered to herself, checking the fresh bandage on his side. It looked like a surgical incision that had become aggressively infected. It wasn't a street fight wound. It was precise. "Nurse Bennett," the sharp nasal voice of Dr. Gregory Alcott cut through the air like a scalpel. Rachel stiffened. Dr. Alcott was the new chief of surgery, a man who cared more about billing codes and insurance pre-authorizations than patient outcomes. He walked into the trauma bay, wrinkling his nose at the muddy boots, sitting in the corner, the patient's only possession. "Yes, doctor." Rachel didn't look up, focusing on cleaning the wound. "Why is this vagrant occupying a trauma bed?" Alcott snapped, flipping through the chart on the tablet. "No insurance, no ID. We are not a homeless shelter, Bennett. We have paying patients in the waiting room. Transfer him to the county clinic." Rachel finally looked up. Her blue eyes were tired but fierce. "Dr. Alcott, he's septic. His heart rate is erratic. If we move him now, he goes into cardiac arrest. I've seen infections like this before. It looks like a battlefield staph infection. He needs aggressive antibiotics and observation, not a bus ride to county." Alcott scoffed, stepping closer, his expensive cologne overpowering the smell of antiseptic. "You are a nurse, Bennett. You change bedpans and follow orders. You do not diagnose. I'm telling you to clear the bed. He's a drain on resources." "He's a human being," Rachel shot back, her voice raising slightly. "And I think he's a veteran. Look at the scars on his shoulder. That's shrapnel scarring." "I don't care if he's the King of England," Alcott hissed, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper. "You have 15 minutes to discharge him. If I come back and he's still here, it won't be him leaving the hospital. It will be you." Alcott spun on his heels and marched out, his white coat billowing. Rachel looked down at the man. His breathing was shallow. He gripped the sheets suddenly, his knuckles turning white. "Easy," Rachel soothed, placing a hand on his forehead. "I've got you." She knew protocol. She knew the hierarchy. She also knew that moving him was a death sentence. She looked at the clock. 2:15 a.m. Alcott was going to his office to nap. He wouldn't be back for rounds until 6:00 a.m. Rachel made a choice. Instead of discharging him, she wheeled bed 4 into the corner of the trauma bay, behind a heavy curtain usually reserved for storage. She hooked him up to a fresh bag of vancomycin, an expensive antibiotic she had to override the digital dispensing cabinet to get. She sat by his side, sponging his forehead with cool water, listening to his mumbled nightmares. Echo 2 position compromise. Get the bird. The man groaned, his body thrashing. You're safe, she whispered. You're at St. Jude's. I'm Rachel. I'm not going anywhere. For 4 hours, she fought his fever. She ignored her other duties, trading favors with the other nurses, asking them to cover her other patients so she could focus on the John Doe. By 5:30 a.m., his fever broke. His heart rate steadied. He opened his eyes, steel grey and sharp, instantly alert despite his condition. Where? His voice was like gravel. Hospital, Rachel said softly. You were in bad shape. Septic shock. The man tried to sit up, but winced. He looked at Rachel, Silly looked at her, analyzing her like she was a tactical variable. You stayed. I stayed. She nodded. Dr. Alcott wanted to kick you out, she admitted, pouring him a cup of water. I hid you. The man took the water, his hand shaking slightly. Thank you. I need to make a call. There's a number in my head. I need a secure line. We don't have secure lines, Rachel smiled sadly. Just a dusty landline at the nurse's station. Before he could answer, the curtain was ripped back. The plastic rings screeched against the metal rail. Dr. Alcott stood there, his face a mask of purple rage. Behind him stood 2 hospital security guards. I warned you. Alcott spat, pointing a shaking finger at Rachel. I gave you a direct order, Bennett. You stole medication. You misappropriated hospital resources. And you defied the chief of surgery. He would have died. Rachel stood up, placing herself between the doctor and the patient. Look at him. He's conscious. The antibiotics worked. I don't care, Alcott screamed. Get him out, and you take her badge. The security guards hesitated. Everyone liked Rachel. She was the heart of the ER. Now, Alcott bellowed. One of the guards, a man named Frank, who Rachel had shared coffee with for years, looked at the floor. I'm sorry, Rachel. Rachel unclipped her badge. She took her stethoscope from around her neck, the one her father had given her when she graduated nursing school, and placed it on the side table. She turned to the man in the bed. You're stable. Don't let them move you until you feel ready. Drink water. The man in the bed didn't say a word. He was staring at Alcott with a look that would have terrified a lesser man, but Alcott was too blinded by ego to notice. The patient's hand moved subtly under the sheet, tapping a rhythm against his thigh, as if counting. Get out, Alcott sneered. Rachel grabbed her purse and her coat. She walked out of the trauma bay, her head high, but her heart shattering in her chest. 10 years of service. Gone in a heartbeat, because she did the right thing. The automatic doors of the emergency room slid open, and the cold morning air hit Rachel like a physical blow. It was raining a miserable, stinging drizzle that soaked through her scrubs immediately. She realized with a sinking feeling that she had left her umbrella in her locker. She wasn't allowed to go back in to get it. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking back at the building. St. Jude's had been her life. She had missed Christmases, birthdays, and anniversaries inside those walls. She had held the hands of the dying and celebrated with the families of the living. And now she was just a trespasser. She checked her pockets. She had her car keys, but then she remembered. Her car, an old Honda Civic, was in the shop for a transmission issue. She had taken the bus to work. The next bus didn't run until 7:15 a.m. on Sundays. It was barely 6:15 a.m. "I guess I'm walking," she muttered, wiping rain from her eyelashes. Her apartment was 5 miles away. A 5-mile walk along the highway, shoulder in the rain. It felt like a fitting end to the worst night of her life. She started walking. The rubber of her nursing clogs squeaked against the wet pavement. Cars whizzed by, splashing dirty water onto her legs. She clutched a small cardboard box Alcott had graciously allowed her to pack a picture of her dog, a coffee mug, and a spare pair of socks. As she walked, the anger began to fade, replaced by a crushing sense of fear. How would she pay rent? Who would hire a nurse fired for insubordination and theft? Alcott would blacklist her. He was petty enough to ensure she never worked in the city again. She was 34 years old, single and unemployed. She was about 2 miles from the hospital, walking along a stretch of road that bordered a large open field used for local fairs in the summer. The rain was coming down harder now. She was shivering uncontrollably. "Just keep moving, Rachel," she told herself, 1 foot in front of the other. Then she heard it. At first it was a low thrumming sound, a vibration in her chest more than a noise. She thought it might be a heavy truck approaching from behind, so she stepped further onto the grass, but the sound didn't come from the road. It came from the sky. The thrumming grew into a rhythmic whop, whop, whop that battered the air. It was loud, deafeningly loud. Rachel stopped and looked up. Through the grey mist and rain, 2 dark shapes materialized. They were massive. Black helicopters, low and aggressive, banking hard over the tree line. They weren't the red and white medical choppers she was used to seeing. These were military. Matte black, no markings. She could easily see bristling with antennas and external pods. "What in the world?" she breathed, shielding her eyes from the rotor wash. The lead helicopter flared its nose, pitching up as it slowed dramatically. It hovered directly over the road, barely 50 feet in the air. The downdraft was immense. It tore the cardboard box from Rachel's frozen hands. Her coffee mug shattered on the asphalt. The picture of her dog tumbled into the wet grass. She covered her head, crouching down, terrified. Was this a crash landing? Was there an emergency? The helicopter didn't crash. It landed, right in the middle of the 4-lane road, blocking traffic in both directions. The second helicopter touched down in the field, adjacent to her, its rotors still spinning, cutting the grass like a giant lawnmower. Cars were slamming on their brakes. People were screaming. Before the skids of the lead helicopter even fully settled, the side doors slid open. 4 men jumped out. They weren't wearing standard army fatigues. They were wearing high-end tactical gear, multicam trousers, combat shirts, heavy plate carriers, and helmets with night vision mounts. They carried rifles slung low across their chests, ready, but not aimed. They moved with a speed and fluidity that was terrifying. They fanned out, securing a perimeter around the helicopter. One man, the leader, didn't look at the traffic. He didn't look at the stunned drivers. He scanned the roadside. He spotted Rachel crouching near the guardrail, soaked and shivering. He sprinted toward her. He was a giant of a man with a thick beard and a scar running through his eyebrow. He stopped 5 feet from her, raising his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "Mom!" he shouted over the roar of the engines. "Are you Nurse Bennett, Rachel Bennett?" Rachel couldn't speak. She just stared at him. "Mom," he barked again, urgent but respectful. "Look at me. Are you the nurse who was just at St. Jude's? The one who treated the John Doe?" Rachel nodded slowly, her teeth chattering. Yes, that's me." The soldier tapped his headset. "Command, we have the asset. I repeat, we have the angel. Condition is wet and cold but secure. He reached out a hand. You need to come with us, ma'am. What? No. Rachel backed away, hitting the guardrail. I was fired. I didn't do anything wrong. I just gave him antibiotics. The soldier's expression softened. He stepped closer, ignoring the rain pounding on his helmet. We know. That man you treated is Captain Elias Thorne of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. He's our team leader. Rachel's eyes widened. The nobody in bed 4. He woke up enough to make one call, the soldier continued. He told us what happened. He told us they threw you out because you saved his life. I just did my job, Rachel stammered. Well, now we're doing ours, the soldier said grimly. General Higgins, that's Captain Thorne's father, is already inbound to the hospital. But Captain Thorne refused to let anyone touch him until you were brought back. He said, and I quote, "Get me the nurse who refused to let me die, or I walk out of here with my IVs trailing behind me." The soldier gestured to the open door of the Black Hawk. Please, ma'am, we have orders to retrieve you. And frankly, I wouldn't want to be Dr. Alcott when we get back there. Rachel looked at her shattered mug on the road. She looked at the traffic jam caused by 2 military helicopters sent specifically for her. She looked at the soldier's extended hand. She took it. Let's go, she said. The soldier helped her up into the cabin. Someone threw a warm wool blanket around her shoulders. As the helicopter lifted off, banking sharply back toward St. Jude's, Rachel looked down at the cars below. She wasn't walking anymore. She was flying to war. And for the first time in her life, she had an army at her back. The roof of St. Jude's Medical Center was not designed for a Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk, let alone 2 of them. The structural integrity was rated for lighter medical transport choppers, but the pilots of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment didn't seem to care about hospital building codes. They set the birds down with a jarring thud that shook dust from the ceiling tiles of the trauma center 4 floors below. Inside the ER, chaos had fully metastasized. Dr. Gregory Alcott was standing at the nurse's station, screaming into a telephone receiver, his face a mottled map of indignation. I don't care who they are. This is a private facility. You tell the police to get those unauthorized aircraft off my roof immediately, or I will sue the city into bankruptcy. He slammed the phone down and turned to the huddled group of nurses and residents. Back to work. Why are you all standing there? If I see one more person looking at the ceiling, you're fired, just like Bennett. The elevator doors at the end of the hallway chimed. Usually this sound preceded the arrival of a gurney or a cafeteria cart. This time the doors slid open to reveal a wall of multicam. 6 operators stepped out, forming a phalanx. In the center walked a man who wore a dress uniform rather than combat gear. General Thomas Higgins was a legend in the special operations community, a man whose silence was rumored to be more terrifying than his shouting. He walked with a cane, a souvenir from Fallujah, but he moved with the momentum of a freight train. And right beside him, wrapped in a grey wool army blanket, her hair wet and matted to her forehead, was Rachel Bennett. The ER went silent. You could hear the hum of the vending machine down the hall. Alcott's jaw dropped. He blinked, looking from the soldiers to Rachel, his brain struggling to compute the impossible equation before him. What is the meaning of this? General Higgins didn't stop until he was nose to nose with the surgeon. Higgins was 60, with silver hair,